1 second here to let people log on and also to make sure our YouTube is working. Yay, I see some people getting on. And hello, YouTube. Thanks for joining us again. I'm so pleased to have some guests with me today from some great institutions. And we're not going to talk a lot about their institutions, a little bit, but not a ton, but more we're going to talk about rankings. And I know that some of you rely on rankings in a way, your parents do, your families do, your friends do. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how that shapes your priorities and whether or not you should pay attention to them. And so without further ado, I'm just going to let my guests introduce themselves. Before we just dive in, a couple nuts and bolts. We do have a Q&A box. You're welcome to ask questions throughout. You don't have to wait till the very end. They might get covered in the interactive presentation that we have today. They might not. So go ahead and ask them. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and ask them there as well. But we'll go ahead and let our friends introduce themselves. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. We are so glad and honored to be a part of the Tuesday Talks, in part because this is something that also aligns with what we as individuals and professionals in the field, as well as institutions, think is important. Helping students to get the resources that they need in order to find the best possible college or university fit for them. And in order to do that, you need information. So that's the goal today, is to try to arm you with some additional information to help you understand the rankings and what they mean. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good morning from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm Chelsea Keeney at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. Thanks for being here today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Walker. I represent Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. So we're looking forward to the session.
Hi, again, Sarah Blackburn from Rutgers University. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so why are we here today and what are we going to do? So you heard Sarah mention that we're hoping to demystify the university rankings during this session. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we mean by that. Our goal for this session, it's not to disprove or to debunk any of these ranking systems. What we want to do is illuminate some of the methodologies these organizations use to arrive at their rankings. And why do we think these methodologies are important? A ranking system, we believe, alone does not ensure your success. It doesn't ensure happiness. It won't guarantee you a job or an internship. It can't promise you a graduate school admissions. Ranking systems don't afford that. It isn't valuable in and of itself. A ranking system is only valuable, we believe, if it aligns with what you consider as important. And we, as admissions officers, we really don't help you strike that balance between rankings and what you find to be important. If you've ever walked through a college fair or checked any of our websites or listened to any college presentations, you probably heard a lot of hype about rankings. It probably seems like every single one of the 4,000 universities in the United States are ranked #1, at least in something. So after seeing us as admissions officers use these ranking systems so much, you might think that all of us working for a university have memorized how the rankings came to be, but you'll probably be surprised. All of us on this call, all three of us, only really got to know these ranking systems and methodologies for this presentation when we started putting it together. It's an easy skill to talk about being ranked #1. That's the easy part. It's a very difficult and greater thing to talk about why the university made it to #1 because of the methodology. And while it's unlikely that any of us admission officers tells you how the rankings are calculated, the information isn't top secret. The 3 ranking systems that we're going to talk about today that you're seeing on the screen, all of their information and their methodology is readily available on their websites. And if you can't find a certain rankings methodologies, it might be a hint that you shouldn't use that ranking system in your decision to choose a university.
Which brings us to today's session. We're here to show you how the ranking sausage is actually made. So we created a few cheat sheets outlining 3 of the most popular rankings metrics. So next time you see a brochure or hear an admissions representative telling you that they're number 1 in this program or that, or top 20 here or there, you'll be prepared. So to participate in this activity of how rankings are formulated, you need to grab your phone, or you could open up another web browser if you're on your laptop or iPad. And we'll be using a platform outside of Zoom or away from YouTube. You're not a bystander in this event. We want you to fully participate. So go ahead, open up another web browser and get ready. We want you to go to this website, menti.com. You can see it on the screen, MENTI.com. And you see there's a code at the very top. You'll enter that code, 2964283, and then you're ready to roll. You're going to play with us. This is our little game, and your goal is to see how well you think you know the metrics of the following rankings bodies. You're going to give it your best guess as to how those rankings weight certain factors, and then we are going to reveal what those factors mean and how exactly are they accounted for in the rankings. And like Seth said, we did not know the details before we dug into it ourselves. We were actually nowhere close to the truth. So you might be surprised as well. Or maybe some of you have trouble sleeping, so you stay up late at night to read the methodologies and help you fall asleep. I don't know.
Could put anyone to bed.
Me included. Let's go ahead and get started. Up first, we have a really little rankings body known as U.S. News and World Report. We want you to enter the weight of each factor that you think U.S. News and World Report has done. Let me go through and define them, but while I'm doing the definitions, please feel free to get started weighting the factors if you think you have a good idea. So the top one is alumni giving. This is the average percentage of living alumni with bachelor's degrees who give back to that school. Next, we have expert opinion. These are surveys that are sent to university presidents, provosts, deans of admissions, and they all rate their peer institutions. In the past, high school counselors were actually included in this expert opinion survey, but that's been discontinued as of 2019. So no more high school counselors. Next, we have faculty resources, which includes a number of different points: class size, faculty salary, the proportion of full-time faculty with the highest or terminal degree in their fields, student to faculty ratio, and the proportion of faculty who are full-time as opposed to part-time or what we call adjunct professors. Next, we have financial resources. This is the average spending per student on instruction, research, student services, and related educational expenditures. But it's actually not any spending on sports, dorms, or hospitals. So just education related. Next, we have outcomes. And the outcomes include a graduation rate within a 6-year window that U.S. News estimates for a school, and then the actual rate at which students complete their degrees. It's also weighted a little bit extra for the graduation and retention of first generation and low income students, which U.S. News and World Report calls social mobility. So it's a little complicated that there's an estimate by U.S. News and World Report, and then there's the actual graduation rate. And the last factor there, student excellence, which is based on the composite of the SAT, ACT scores, and then the high school class standing of the students. So go ahead, enter what you believe is the appropriate weighting of this rankings body, and then we're going to do a giant reveal. I'm going to leave it to Seth to surprise us for the reveal because I actually cannot see how many students have entered.
I
It's
need
like
the
a
drum
grain
roll.
of sand on mine.
No worries. We're going to do it in 3, 2, 1.
Ooh, okay, okay. I'm actually going to take some notes because I have a very bad memory. I want to see what these students thought. So they believed that outcomes was at the top at 23%. Okay, okay. And then closely behind, faculty resources at 21%. Oh my gosh, faculty would love you so very much seeing that. And then we've got student excellence. These are all, it's a horse race. They're pretty close. And then we have the financial resources. And I see you've put expert opinion quite low, 13 alumni giving at the bottom. Okay. That's fascinating. It is interesting that your top 3 have about 4% in between them. So all quite close together. Folks, are you ready to see the real deal? Ooh, Sarah can hardly wait. Let's not keep her waiting, Seth.
can't
It's
wait, I can't
cruel.
wait.
It's cruel. Let's do it. Boom. This is what US News and World Report actually does. So you were correct in thinking that outcomes was first, but you'd actually underweighted it. They put 40% onto this. And if you're interested in the granular breakdown, it's actually 22% from their estimated graduation rate, and then 8% of the actual graduation rate. And then they've included indebtedness and social mobility to make up this 40%. Now, folks, one thing I want to point out, you put expert opinion at the bottom. This is the second biggest factor, 20%. So if we just look at the top 2, outcomes and expert opinion, it's 60%. You needed more of that. You put that down quite low. But I'd like to point out, you're correct with the alumni giving, that you had it last at 7%. It's 3%. So you're right, it's quite low. Another interesting point is the student excellence, that y'all were thinking it would be a bit higher, and it's actually only 7% thinking about ACT and class standing. Overall, not too bad. I'm actually impressed that you got most of the order correct. There you have it, US News and World Report.
All right, now that we've learned a little bit about US News and World Report, let's take a look at a different rankings body. So this time we're going to look at Times Higher Education. That is coming out of the UK, so it's a British ranking system. And there are some things on here that are similar to what you saw from US News and World Report, but some of these metrics or indicators are quite different. So we'll go through each of those. Teaching. So teaching is looking at the student to staff ratio, the doctorate to bachelor degree seeking student ratio, number of doctoral students that are teaching classes versus full-time faculty teaching classes, basically anything that's related to the teaching at the university that can be quantified with a number. Research, similarly, looking at the volume of research, the amount of income that a university is receiving for research, and the amount that's being produced. They take that metric and adjust it to normalize based on the type of subject. So for example, there tends to be a lot more money given to an institution for science research. So they try to equalize that a little bit with some of their humanities using very crazy fancy calculus I will never understand. Next, we're looking at citations. So that is, again, looking at the research influence of the university, looking at the number of times that a faculty member, graduate student, whomever at that university is being cited in someone else's research. So they looked at 77 million citations and almost 13 million journal articles in order to count this up and figure out how many times a university has been cited in the last year. Next, we're looking at international outlook. So international outlook takes the percentage of international students, staff, faculty, any collaborations that the university is doing abroad, either for research or study abroad, exchange students or faculty, anything that has to do with a connection to another country abroad. Industry income. This is an interesting one. This is looking at the amount of research income, so the money being given to an institution directly from the industry that research might impact. So for example, if Apple was to donate a couple $1 million to a university for research within technology, that would be part of this industry income calculation. Then at the bottom here, we have reputation surveys. So this is similar to the expert opinion survey done by US News and World Report, but they break it in half. So we have one that's about the reputation of teaching at that institution. They send these surveys out to faculty, about 21,000 different responses for what folks consider to be the quality of teaching at a research institution. And then again, for research. So looking at the amount of research done and sending out a survey to an institution's peer institutions or peer industries in order to find out what they think is the quality of research at that institution. All right, so I will also rely on Seth to let me know when it's time to unveil what you guys think. What do you think the weight is for Times Higher Ed in these different metrics here?
Everybody about 5 more seconds to hit that final submit button. And here we go.
Wow. Okay. I too have a brain like a sieve, so I'm going to go ahead here and take some notes. I'm seeing a theme here, and again, as Chelsea said, faculty would love that you are so interested in their teaching, both the reputation of the teaching and those quantifiable metrics as it relates to teaching. And I'm also seeing that you're putting a pretty heavy emphasis on research. Must have some folks out here in the audience that are looking to get their hands dirty when they get to university. Another thing that I'm finding quite interesting here is we've got international outlook at 8%. So I guess we don't care so much as a contingent what types of relationships the institution has internationally. Interesting, coming from some international students. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at what Times Higher Ed actually weights here. Ooh. Look at that. So while you guys did have an emphasis on research, looking at the way that you weighted these different factors, research, although you had it at 20%, is actually down at the bottom at 12. However, 30% of what Times Higher Ed is factoring these rankings is based on citations. So I guess still tangentially related to teaching or the research quality at the institution, but you guys had citations at 10%. Times Higher Ed has tripled that to 30%. Another thing that's pretty interesting is that you were almost spot on for that international outlook. You had it at 8%, they've got it at 7%, so definitely in line there. The other thing that I'm noticing here is industry income, quite towards the bottom. But I can understand why a group that was very focused on outcomes and maybe what it might mean to get a job after graduation or completing your degree was also interested in industry income. Times Higher Ed thinks that the research is a little bit more important than the donations of money that they're receiving from outside. So there you have it. We're ready to do one more.
Now that everybody has the hang of all of this, we're going to do one more, which is QS World Universities. So we have a few categories here. I'll run through these really quick so you understand exactly what they are, and then we'll see where you all land with the voting. So this first one you see up here is the Academic Reputation Survey. So this is kind of similar to that expert opinion that we heard about in US News and World Report. About 100,000 faculty, staff, admin were asked to provide their thoughts on teaching and research quality at other colleges and university. So those responses from the 100,000 surveys became this category of Academic Reputation Survey. The next one is citations per faculty. Maybe a little self-explanatory, but this looks at the number of times faculty members at a particular institution have been cited in research papers. Because citations tend to be more prevalent in the hard sciences, in those papers, QS does try to do their best to equalize the weight of humanities citations with STEM citations. Interestingly enough, even though they attempt to do that, the STEM citations do receive quite, or just a slightly bit more weight even after this recalculation because there's so many of them. So that's citations per faculty. Next one is employer reputation survey. This is another opinion-based survey, but this time it's sent out to employers asking which institutions there are most competent, innovative, and effective employees graduated from. So those survey responses make up this employer reputation survey. Next is faculty to student ratio. Again, pretty self-explanatory. They just take the number of faculty members and have it divided by the number of students for the international student ratio or the international faculty ratio. It will go through and say how many international students are in the overall class size. The faculty student ratio, the one that's in the middle that I skipped, that is the ratio of faculty members and other academic staff, not like administrators, but academic staff to the number of students at the institution. So they divide that and you get a rate. So those are the categories. Let's have folks figure out which ones they think are most important. And we will reveal here, now that I have the power, we'll reveal right now. Okay. Everybody is feeling like citations is top with nearly a quarter. Faculty student ratio is down at the bottom at 10%, but still not that much of a gap, kind of like the first one, it's kind of bunched a little bit. The employer reputation survey is up there at 21%. International student ratio, so you're looking for quite a few international students. And academic reputation kind of sits there in the middle. Okay, let's take a look and see what the actual QS is. So you had citations up at the top, but academic reputation survey actually accounts for 40% of QS World University's ranking system. Citations and faculty student ratio is, well, if you combined those, it would be the same as the academic reputation survey. And you can see that your almost 30%, 26%, that's the one that comes in second. So you have a pretty, up at the top, which is similar, but you can see just a little bit of a shift. Citations, at least with QS, is by far the most important. Well done.
Well, now that you know what you know, and you've learned a little bit about how each of these rankings are calculated, which one do you agree with? Which one is most in line with your own priorities? We're so curious what resonated with you and why. But maybe actually it's none of them, or you could have another ranking that you prefer to rely on. Feel free to let us know that one. To my point, exactly, Shanghai rankings. So when you look at Shanghai rankings, it's actually, let me get the acronym right, ARWU, and that comes from a Chinese university. So I think that's a really good point culturally to think about, where is the ranking coming from? US News and World Report very obviously comes out of the US, but when we look at THE or QS, those are both actually out of the UK. I like this person in yellow. I'm unsure if I agree with any of them. I think that's important to think about. Which factors in the rankings make sense to you, align with your priorities, or which do you feel like, whoa, no way, those don't match with what I'm looking for? Totally. This person in green, you agree with US News and World Report because you're looking for a job. So you're looking at the outcomes, the graduation rate, assuming that students who graduate within 6 years are more likely to actually get hired. And I think another component of this is that indebtedness. So thinking about getting a job that allows you to pay back what you may have borrowed. I like the student in purple. It's the student excellence is a big deal. I think that's such an important thing to think about your classmates. What kind of culture on campus are you looking for? Hyper competitive? Are you looking for a certain culture to abound? Important to think about ROI for the student. How much are you paying for any of these universities, and what do you believe you can get out of them? These are great responses. Thank you for sharing these.
Wonderful. So now that we've looked at a few reasons why you all agree with some of the rankings that you just saw, we're going to kind of switch things up a little bit and ask what are some of the problematic aspects of the rankings that you just looked through. It's obvious that the creators of these ranking systems put a lot of thought, time and effort, and as Sarah said, a lot of calculus that's above our head into these ranking systems, but we're sure they're not perfect. So after hearing the specific factors that go into these rankings, what would you say is problematic? Maybe if we put this a different way, what surprised you, and maybe in a bad way, when you heard about these methodologies? It may be a critique of some of the ranking systems that we didn't see on the last slide that Chelsea was talking about. Let's take a look at a few of these. Yeah, what about job placements? Make sure I get a position after I'm done. They have nothing to do with me. That's good. How does it affect me as a person and what I want to be happy? Career, that's really, really good. Safety, I want to study writing, not science. That's a really, really insightful one after hearing about that STEM gets so much more weight in some of these areas that you're looking for humanities that maybe is specific to your degree program. This has to rank everything about a university, not a specific area that you're looking for. That's really insightful. Welcoming on the campus, there's nothing included there. What about the environment? These are really, really wonderful. And similarly, I think it kind of bleeds into this next question we have for you. That's what factors do you think are missing? This is kind of just a word cloud. So just kind of quickly right off the top of your head, throw a word in there and hit enter. You can submit more than once. And especially after you did just such a great job on that last slide of coming up with some overall problems, what are some of the other factors you would like to see in some of these ranking systems? Maybe put it another way, if you were creating your own ranking list, what would you put into a ranking system if you were creating your own? Satisfaction is really, really big. Fun, happiness, kind of related as well. Job placement and career kind of are similar topics that you all put in there, which is really, really wonderful and very, very important. Graduation rate kind of connected to that. I think the job placement and career comments are really, really important. But yeah, it appears nowhere in the rankings. And I think the closest thing was employer reputation, which doesn't kind of lead directly to employability or outcomes. You might need to go to another information source maybe to understand employment outcomes for universities. If we're going to give a tip, maybe generally the source of our employment statistics will be at a university's career development center. At a lot of universities, especially large ones like ours, each specific school will have a dedicated career development office for graduates of that school. So you can even get specific information about outcomes for finance students at a specific school, or outcomes for art students or journalism students, and so on. So you can be as specific as you can with some of these outcomes and employability. Cost is another really, really good one. Happiness is the one word that is the most entered in this word cloud. These are wonderful. Thanks for sharing these, and thanks for being so kind of insightful on what the ranking systems are missing.
What a lead in to the next slide to have happiness as the largest word, because what do you need to be happy? Now that you've identified what's missing from the rankings, what if you think about these questions on the screen in conjunction with factors like food and cost and weather and safety, community? What if you set the rankings aside and you asked yourself, what do I need from a university? What do I need to be happy? What do I need to be successful? What do I need to feel accepted and to find my community? This whole session we've put on is about using more than one factor to complicate your decision making. Only using one ranking system in this decision is simplistic, and you are not a simple person. It's not a simple decision, and it shouldn't be. This decision is not like online shopping for a phone case or just running out to a store to pick up a shirt. There are lasting benefits to complicating this decision beyond a single rankings list that you may, or as we found, may not agree with the methodology. Maybe it's time to ask yourself, should you recalibrate? Should you take something else into account personally That could be the difference between a 4-year slog or a 4-year transformation during university. We want you to trust yourself because you know what you need, you know what you want, you know what you're hoping for in this next phase of life. And as Walt Whitman says, you are large, you contain multitudes.
It's wonderful. And as Chelsea said, that this complex decision, it requires a real complex and varied set of information inputs. And without any hesitation, you all identified incredible college choice factors that weren't covered by at least these big 3 rankings. And even in the Q&A, we see other people throwing in things about what about Nobel Prize winners or student satisfaction or graduation, some of those other factors. So there's no shortage of choice factors that you identify that are important to you. They just might not be covered by these 3 rankings. So the question now is, what are some other inputs that you can identify or we can point you to that might start to touch on some of those areas of happiness, success, acceptance, community, things that are maybe important to you or maybe outside of these quantifiable rankings factors. Some of these other inputs, they may be in the form of rankings, just different than the ones that we've shown you. Before this presentation, we actually asked a current student to spend exactly 1 hour and only 1 hour looking up rankings on sports, cost, food, weather, diversity, inclusion, study abroad programs. And she found more than 20 rankings lists separate from the 3 that we just went over. I think we have a little slide. Yeah, so here's a list of just the ones that she found in 1 hour. There's as wild as the most pet-friendly school or the best party schools in America, or as maybe a little bit more important than pets is like what it means to be have mental health and mental wellness, the best schools that support you in that endeavor, or the most LGBTQ plus friendly schools in the United States through the Campus Pride Index, or an ethnically diverse college in America. So there are other ranking systems that might not either have the marketing budget or might not have the publicity that you've seen with some of the big 3 that you've seen that we've just talked about today. But you might do a little bit of digging and find some of these rankings bodies that may connect with something that's more important to you and will affect your happiness and your community and your acceptance when you're on a university campus. And even if you don't want to venture beyond the most well-known ranking system, even US News and World Report, which we talked about first today, is starting to see that future students want something beyond just the top 100 national universities. That was the methodology we talked about. For the first time since 2003, when I was in college, they're publishing articles on factors that have been proven to enhance learning outcomes and are connected to students' academic and success. So they're putting out articles and some rankings on schools with first-year experience, with co-op and internship programs. They're doing learning communities and residential situations. They're doing senior capstones, service learning opportunities, study abroad, undergraduate research projects, writing in the disciplines. None of those factors will appear in the top 100, but you're even seeing US News and World Report start to republish some of those as they see students like you have differing desires on what it means to find a school that will be successful for you. And even beyond that, some of these inputs that we're talking about can't be in the form of rankings. I mean, how do you rank something as subjective as making friends or signing up for clubs or coping with homesickness, or what does it mean to get through a cold winter? There might not be a ranking for that. But even without these ranking systems or something that's 1 to 100, there's ways to collect information about universities that will certainly help you find a school that fits your personality and your academic, career, and social goals. Just to show you a few of these ways that you might identify alternative inputs for a school that really connects with who you are as a person. We'll show you a few of these. On the school that I'm at, one thing that we do is we publicize opportunities for you to connect with current students through an online chat option, so you can ask them as many questions as you want to. At Minnesota, there's blog posts. If you don't really have a question, but you want to read the thoughts of other students, there's a whole page on different blog posts, and you can read about some of these bloggers and see what their interests are. There's videos. As you can see, Rutgers has a video that follows some students through their daily life, 5 students through what it's like to be on their campus, through what they do. There's campus tours to get a feel for what the university looks like and feels like if you're not able to visit there, and if you feel like you'll be comfortable in that environment. There's similar kind of view of campus through Instagram posts where you can see what students are doing, see where they're living. A lot of universities will have this type of social online presence. They might have little stories where you can follow a student and see what their day is like. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to diversify that input as much as you possibly can, so that your decision is more of a complex decision like you are, so that you can land on a university and feel like you've made the best decision you can on factors that go well beyond just the factors that we looked at in the methodologies of the universities.
Thank you guys so much for participating and for all of your very thoughtful insights on what might make a college or university a good fit for you, what information that you need in order to figure that out. We hope that getting to peek a little bit behind the curtain of how US News and World Report, Times Higher Ed, and QS actually calculate their rankings will help you to understand what they mean and what role they can play in your college search. I also hope that some of the tools that Seth just shared with you will be able to help you narrow your college list down even further. You can take those rankings and those lists that we shared and even some institutional websites to provide some more information and opportunities to learn more about what the colleges you're considering have to offer and what kind of experience you can have there as a student. We definitely encourage you to talk with students. That's the best way to better understand what their experience is like. But look at the videos, talk to students online, contact admissions officers, look at every weird ranking that you can find in order to better distill down that list. I'm sure that you've heard that these are likely to be some of the best 4 years of your life. And the only way to make sure that that happens for you is to do the research now to set yourself up for success and land at a place that you know that you're going to be happy. We have one more favor to ask. We do this presentation with students all over the world, and we're constantly trying to make it better. So with that in mind, we'd love to hear a little bit of your feedback. This one's anonymous. It won't show up on the screen, but you will need to go back to menti.com. So just type that web link back into your browser and put in the code that you see on the screen here. That's 1773696. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing all this great information. I have already watched this presentation and I still learn something new every time. And I realized too that my brain doesn't keep in the information. I'm like, what is that? Wait again. So thank you for sharing that with us. And we want to open it up to any questions that people might have right now. I'd like to start off with one. Is there, if you were to have to rank your institutions, how would you go about doing it? Like what, like, because you all have to do kind of presentations about your institutions on a regular basis, kind of telling students about your school. So if you were to kind of come up with some metrics, what types of metrics would you consider yourselves?
That's a hard-hitting question, Gloria. I think that, at least for me, one of the first things that comes to mind is diversity. I think that's one of the things that makes Rutgers quite special is the number of diverse students we have on campus, faculty, but also programs too. And as I'm starting to think about other things that I think are important, like student satisfaction, things that we saw on that list, a lot of the things that make universities special are hard to quantify. It's difficult to kind of try to take things like happiness or student satisfaction or experiences that students are having off campus and give those a number that you can rationally calculate, which is likely why you see so many things like citations. I mean, you can count those. So it's kind of easier to put schools on an equal playing field from there. But yeah, I think for me, student satisfaction diversity would be at the top of the list of things I would factor into a ranking about Rutgers. What about you guys?
I think you're so right, Sarah, about the difficulty of quantifying or ranking some of the things that hindsight indicates is really should be important to the decision-making process. And by that, I mean, I sit down with a lot of students, especially a lot of the students that you saw on the screen who are members of the International Student Ambassadors Group. And their reason for choosing the university was a ranking. They say, I wanted to go to this school because it was ranked here. But then after they spend a year or less or a couple years, the importance of that ranking for the program they're in isn't what they talk about any longer. They're not telling us about how proud they are that this business school is ranked here or the chemical engineering school is ranked here or wherever. They're talking about their interaction with other classmates. They're talking about the community they're building. They're talking about their development into what they're going to be like for the rest of their lives. So those are very difficult to quantify. It's much easier to say how many citations in a paper do you have and put that in a ranking system. But the community that they're building is very, very important to them. And the feeling of like being at home, as touchy-feely as that sounds, that's what we're hearing students say is what makes their experience worth staying for. And so that's something, at least at IU, that I think would be beneficial to somehow be in the ranking system if that was possible.
I would say mine is really similar to Seth's. We have a great person in our visit office, and when he trains tour guides, he does such a great job telling the tour guides, you're welcome to say what you dislike about this university to visiting families and students, but tell them why you come back. Because you must make a decision about, I will come back next semester, I'm going to keep enrolling until I get this degree. And why is that? And what I see, especially from international students I work with, would be the student services that are available to them and who they can access for help, for support, for a challenge. It's not all about making life easier for you, but it's about developing you. So I would ask that question specifically to students at schools you're interested in, not why did you choose that school? Because like Seth said, we're all guilty of looking at rankings and thinking of cost benefit or return on investment, but asking a student, why do you keep coming back? You spent a year there and you didn't transfer. I mean, you could have transferred to a better ranked school, whatever that means. But instead of shooting for that and every year trying to climb that ladder of rankings, you decided to come back. And why is that? What keeps you at that university? That would be my answer.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you so much. For the students that are still kind of, early on in the process, you all gave some great suggestions, like these interesting ranking lists, but also and things on your own websites that would give more color on the institution. Are you all able to kind of type maybe a link in the chat of kind of where would be kind of the portal to enter to find out more? Because students, international students have always had a hard time doing the tours, for example, but now even more so with the pandemic. So maybe your virtual tours page, or if you don't mind typing that in the chat. I think as a younger student, not being able to have those opportunities, it's easy to kind of go to the rankings list first because that's where things are consolidated. But, as you're typing kind of your link, do you have suggestions on how an international student should approach that beginning college search process? How do you pare down the thousands and thousands of institutions that are available?
I think there are a few obvious ones off the bat that I encourage students to go to. One is, of course, programmatic, because if you think about some programs that are maybe a little less common, a good example is architecture. We've all heard of this major before, but actually not all universities have architecture. Or recently, I've had a lot of students asking about game design and making video games. Actually, very few universities have that. They may have a graphic design program, but that is very, very different from video game. Or thinking about what type of specific engineering are you looking at? Again, engineering, business, psychology, those are all quite prevalent. But what are you interested in? Is it developmental child psychology? Is that university doing research in those fields? I'd start looking at what are the faculty doing in those fields, because you may read something about a certain faculty member and you think like, I gotta be in their classroom, I have to learn from them. So looking at the program and then looking at cost, and you can see cost varies so widely in the US, and I would be very careful not to make the assumption that the higher the cost means the better the quality of program. As we know, there are for-profit universities in the USA that are actually fairly low quality. And then there are some great lower cost options. At Minnesota, we have a lot of transfer students. So they choose to go to a community college first for their 2 years and then transfer to the U of M. And that's actually a lower cost way to obtain a degree. And we at Minnesota don't have any problem with that. So I would look at what can your family afford for the total cost of attendance? Do they have your program? And I would start culling the list from there. Seth, Sarah, what else would you guys recommend for students to shorten that list of a million bazillion down to something manageable?
I'm always encouraging folks to think about what you cannot handle. If you know that you don't want to be in the sunshine all the time, I don't know why, but maybe that's how you feel, then you don't want to look at a school that's going to be in a warm climate. Maybe you know for sure that you cannot be in a lecture hall with 300 students. That's okay. So then you're looking at smaller institutions. But I think trying to figure out kind of what your deal breakers are, so to speak, can be a helpful way to pare down the list, because especially if you're thinking about a program like psychology, which most institutions have, then the net is so wide. So just thinking about what I cannot live with or what I must have on the opposite end of that, I think can be really helpful in order to help start cooling that down a bit.
I'd say even if you're a little bit even more at sea, even a little bit more lost with that, and you're like, well, you've given me all these resources to students I can get in touch with, but I don't even know if I like your university, or I don't even know like what I'm looking for yet. One thing that some of the students on our campus have found helpful is they've talked with upper class people that have graduated from their high school. So maybe you had like a really, really great friend who was a year above you and they went off to college. Maybe you haven't connected with them in a little bit of time, but it might not be a bad idea just to reach out to them and say, what's college like? How are things going? What did you use to make your decision that you're so glad you did, or you wish you could have just thrown out as like a factor of deciding universities? That may be your kind of first connection with someone who's in college who has like been through that process before. And that can be really, really helpful to have kind of like a mirror to be able to bounce ideas off of that friend who's now in college and has gone through a little bit of that, to get a sense for what's important to you based on their experience, and maybe, you know, stand on the shoulders of giants, be able to like use their experience to assist you, maybe skirt around some pitfalls. But then remember that if you do that, make sure you connect with someone who's a grade younger than you after you go off to college and do the same thing for them.
Wonderful. Great advice. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to give you all an opportunity just kind of say some final thoughts. I think we're done with questions for now. As always, for every Tuesday talk, we encourage people, if you're interested in these specific institutions, each of these institutions has lots of opportunities to engage with you and answer your specific questions. So do not hesitate to reach out. Please do. But for Seth and Sarah and Chelsea, any kind of final words as we say goodbye this week? No final words. You all have you've given all of your great advice already. It's been delightful as always, a refreshing topic because I think often we're just talking about kind of the processes and how to get in and the competitiveness of college, but nice to kind of have a refreshing conversation about what's important. And so just an encouragement to all of you who are listening. It's beyond test scores and it's beyond grades and it's beyond kind of what your achievements and list is, but really kind of thinking about your future and how, all those things that you put in that word cloud, happiness and student satisfaction, these are all things that you can be thinking about. And so we just want to encourage you in this time of uncertainty to have moments of reflection, talk a lot to your counselors and your friends and your family, reach out to us. We're happy to have conversations with you as well. And we know how difficult this process is. So just want to give you an extra ounce of energy and encouragement as you go. And thank you so much once again for joining us for Tuesday Talks. Everyone have a great evening.